Welcome to the Possible Creative Podcast, where we talk with smart creative people doing smart creative work, which inspires others like you to pursue your own smart creative work. If you want to be more creative or bring your creative work to the next level, this podcast is for you, whether it's music, game dev, film, writing, dance, art, any expression of yourself, really. On this podcast, I invite people who will inspire you, break your self-limiting beliefs, give you permission to pursue your creative vision, and to do it to the best of your ability. I'm your host, Patrick Wayne. Hello. Thanks for watching or listening. Today on this episode, Wayne Self is an award-winning playwright, composer, music director with deep spiritual and historic roots in rural Louisiana. His 2013 play Upstairs, the first stage work of any kind about the deadly 1973 arson fire at a New Orleans gay bar, premiered to a sold-out run and national press coverage and was hailed as a force of nature by Theatremania. His current play, The Foursight Saga, was a grand prize winner in the Hollywood-based New Musicals Inc. search for new musicals, and will be produced via livestream this August. If this weren't enough, his comic book, Secrets of Bayou Sha, is coming to digital platforms this summer. Links are in the show notes. Please check it out. But before I introduce you to Mr. Wayne Self, please smash that subscribe button and or that thumbs up button. This tells the algorithm to recommend this podcast to others like you. Thank you for your support. Once this podcast crosses 1,000 subscribers, I will sing the intro to the following episode like I'm in a Wayne Self musical theater production. Wayne, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. It's a pleasure having you.
It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining. I'm very excited to talk to you because you are a bit of a Renaissance man. You do a lot of things. Musical theater. It looks like you've done some filming. You're writing a comic book right now. There's a lot to talk about. But let's start with what you're doing right now, which is you're working on this comic book. Can you tell me a little bit about what that is and where people can find it?
Sure. So when I've been working in musical theater, and when COVID hit, it just sort of it ground everything to a standstill in that world. And I kept writing. I finished a play, and it won some awards, and it's going to be produced this year. But rather than just focus on musical theater, I thought, when's it going to come back? Who knew at the time? So I thought, let me keep writing, but let me write elsewhere. Let me try something else. And I've always, since I was a kid, I've been interested in comic books. And so I said, well, this is a chance for me to try that out. So I took one of my plays and I adapted it into a comic book. And it's a story about a young gay man growing up in rural Louisiana in poverty, whose gay mentor goes missing. And the young man Albert is sort of on the hook for that, and under suspicion. And he and a frenemy, I guess, or really a stranger at first, have to team up and clear their name and figure out what really happened to their mentor. The reason I chose that is as the story is the reason I choose a lot of things. There's a lot more gay visibility out there in the media, but the story is almost always, it's set in the city. It's, people who've left home, moved to the city to find their way and to find their chosen family, to find their culture. And that's a great story, but it's not the only story. And there are so many LGBTQIA, et cetera, people who don't leave the country and who don't leave the suburbs or their rural lives for whatever reason. There are many, many different reasons. Some choose to stay. Some have ties to family that they don't want to strain or break, or they have responsibilities, and so it's just not an option for them to move to New York or LA or San Francisco or one of the sort of gay cultural centers in our country. So they stay. And to me, that is a vast, unexplored country when it comes to the narratives that we have about gay people. And so this comic book explores one such group of people in one little town with a very realistic but also fantastical history So we get to delve into some of that and explore some of the mystical things about Louisiana that some people know and some people don't, and then we get to explore it in a gay context. So it's a lot of fun, and the fun part about it for me is it's open-ended. Usually, with theater, you have to have a beginning, middle, end. You have to know exactly where you're going. You have to get there really quick. You have only so long to keep those butts in the seats, and you have to tell a whole story really fast. With this, there are so many different stories to tell, and as long as people are interested, I could keep writing these stories forever.
Yeah, I think that switching mediums is obviously a great way to grow. It's a great way to bring in a whole new audience. It's not the kind of story, well, Marvel and the mainstream comics have delved into LGBTQ plus topics at times.
Yeah.
There's very few stories told that are specifically about this element of humanity, right?
Right.
So I think it's a very interesting story to bring to that space. So I commend you for doing that.
It's exciting. I was able, I didn't try to, but by chance I found a trans artist. It was sort of a coincidence. The artist that I chose happened to be trans, and they're doing a fantastic job. It's a good-looking, lush comic. It doesn't look like anime or manga, but it also doesn't look like sort of a typical superhero comic. It's got its own sort of look, and so I'm really excited to get it out there. Right now, it is available on Webtoons, and it's going to be available on Comixology here within the next few weeks.
Great. So those make it very accessible, where people, even if they don't traditionally consume comic books, it's very easy to find the digital version. And I find that especially on a tablet, reading in that format electronically is nice because they letterbox each frame.
Yeah.
And it really, you're not looking at a full page of information, you're looking frame by frame, and it gives some life to reading comic books in a way that I think is really compelling.
Yeah. I don't read comics on anything but a tablet anymore. It just got to the point. I've never been a good collector of comics. I've been a reader, and then the comics are sitting around the house, and you're supposed to put them in little bags and do it. And I'm just not. That's just too fiddly for me. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to keep up with it. So for me, it's been great because it doesn't feel wasteful. It doesn't feel like I have to take care of these things once I've read them. So it's not junking up the house with a bunch of comic books. So I love the digital digital format, and I know that some people really love print, and if we get enough interest, and we'll probably have to go to Patreon, but if we can find a budget for it, we'll do a nice sort of well-bound print version as a graphic novel. That's
great. Well, congrats on. It sounds like the first 2 chapters are already available on Webtoons.
Yeah.
And so congrats on getting that out. I think that's a great.
Yeah, and
it's a monumental achievement to just get that.
I don't know if we said the name. It's called The Secrets of Bayou Sha, and Sha is spelled SHA, so people end up saying Sha, but it can be said either way. But so Secrets of Bayou Sha. Okay,
I'll make sure we include a link in the show notes, and that way people can find it.
Great.
When they listen to this, that's great. So let's rewind. So. You got into musical theater writing. When do you remember first thinking, I think I want to write?
Well, I've always been a songwriter. My mom has the story she tells about me just writing songs around the house, or when I'm playing outside, as little as 3 or 4 years old. I've always just been a person that expressed myself that way. My dad was a musician, still is a musician, and he played in honky tonks around in North Louisiana, and still does. And but he insisted that I be that I play a church instrument rather than a honky tonk instrument. So no drums for me, no guitar for me. I had to play the piano, and he just wanted to keep me out of the bars, and it didn't work. But because it turns out you can play piano in bars too. But he tried, and I did work as a music director in various churches from the time I was probably 13 or 14, and I would employ my songwriting and arranging skills in those areas. First at more conservative churches, as that's how I was brought up, and then as I started to come out in more liberal and gay affirming churches, and I did that a total of 20 years, and it was while I was working at a church called Many Journeys MCC in San Mateo, California, that I was taking classes at a local seminary, and one of the classes was about the history of the MCC church. And I'm reading my histories, and I read that there was a fire at this bar in New Orleans called the Upstairs Lounge, and that this fire took place in 1973 at this gay bar. It was an arson fire. And that 32 people died in this fire. So before the Pulse Massacre, which we recognized the anniversary of the Pulse Massacre just last week, before the Pulse Massacre, this was the largest mass killing of LGBT people in U.S. history. And I'm from Louisiana, and I'm gay, and I'd never heard about it until I'm, in my 40s, reading this in a history about the MCC church, because it turned out that the church met at this bar, and a lot of MCC church members died in the fire, and that was the connection there. And I was floored. I almost literally fell out of my chair, and I thought, well, how come no one knows about this, and what's going on here? So I started reading more and more about it, and the more I read, the more I realized that that the stories of the people who died in the fire were fascinating stories, and that the people, they weren't just people who died. They were people who lived and loved and created and fought and had weaknesses and strengths, and they were people with whom I became obsessed. And from that point, I thought, well, I'm a songwriter. I'm a writer of other kinds of things. This is a story that needs telling. I'm going to tell it. And I rearranged my life essentially to be able to tell it. I didn't think that I had enough composition skills, so I went back to school and got a master's degree focusing on composition. And while I was doing that, I had started to write these stories, and I did a lot of research and met people who were writing books on the subject and got their manuscripts before they were even published, and I just delved into it. And before long, the word got out around here in New Orleans that I was writing this. And I got a phone call one day from this guy. He said, "How dare you? What do you think you're doing? Writing a musical about our tragedy down here. What makes you think that this is a good idea?" And, fair. When people think about musicals, they're thinking about kick lines and they're thinking of musical comedy. And of course, that's not what this was, but he had no way of knowing that, and he didn't know me. And so I talked to him, and I said, when royalty dies, they write these big operatic productions about it. When people die, there's often music associated with that. New Orleans is a musical city. Why not musical theater to honor these people? I'm not a sculptor. I'm not a painter. No one is telling these stories. And if the tools that I have at my disposal happen to be music and theater, then those are the tools that that I have to use. By the time the conversation was over, and I spoke to him better than I'm saying it here, but by the time the conversation was over, he was ready to have a fundraiser to help get the play done in New Orleans. So,
Wow.
So we had that fundraiser and others. We raised about $20,000 on Kickstarter, and I started to pull the thing together in LA, knowing that I would have to, basically, because I live in LA, I would have to, or around LA, I would have to fly. I would have to create it there, and then fly it here to New Orleans, and at great expense. So. But the community, the city was ready for it. I had people. No one stayed in a hotel. I had 10 actors, and I had a bunch of musicians and directors and various crew and cast, and they all got put up in nice houses here in New Orleans, just by people in the community who said, "Hey, let them stay here," and so. I would run a little van around the city and pick everyone up and bring them to rehearsals, and then then bring them to the performances. And we had a sold out run here, and it was I think a turning point in the city at moving the story from something that they were something to be ashamed of, to something to be not proud of, but something that to acknowledge as an important part of gay history here in the city, and to stand and remember the people who died.
There's a lot to talk about there.
No, it's a big subject.
I think it's fascinating that you were inspired and you started writing, and by the end you have a master's degree. You've had hundreds, thousands of people organize around this effort, people willing to rearrange their entire lives to be part of it. There's a moment in a lot of projects when people, as a creative myself and a creator, I just assume everyone wants to do their own thing, but most people are looking for something to be part of, something to put their energy behind, because starting something is so intimidating, and something like creating something from nothing is so hard, and they don't know where to start, but they can add their energy and their contribution to something else. Suddenly things take on a life bigger than you or I. And then you move from this role of creator to shepherd.
Yeah, that's exactly what I experienced. At some point, and once it was written, my role became not even producer. I wouldn't even say producer would be the word. It was, shepherd. It was to be the engine that made sure this happened, and the great thing about that project was everyone knew it was bigger than me. Everyone, it was easy for me to sort of lead the charge, because it clearly, just by the nature of it, was more important than me. It wasn't, hey, I wrote a thing. It wasn't, hey, look, I did something. Everyone follow me. It was, hey, no one knows about this. Actors, the first time you ever heard about this fire was when you got the script. This is important. Let's go. And I found it a whole lot easier to lead when I was able to not feel like my ego was involved at all. That was unprecedented for me, and I haven't found that again. I have other projects. I've been doing things since, but a project like that's in your bones that it's so important that it be done, and if you don't do it, who will? So that's I want that. I want that to happen again.
Mm-hmm.
because, subsequent projects are, oh yeah, okay, here's a cool thing. Here's a nice idea. Here's something that could get a few laughs. Here's something that could be entertaining, but it's not that convergence of, I guess, art and activism that was,
Yeah. If you look at the body of work, though, there's very few artists or creators who are able to do that every single time, and nor would you necessarily want to stay in that emotional, mental, and physical state.
Oh my goodness! Let me tell you, after I went into a depression after, because it almost. I would almost liken it, and this is a little ignorant because I've never experienced it, but I would almost liken it to postpartum depression. Of just like, okay, we did it. We did the thing. We did it. This is something we've been working on for years, and it's done, and it's happened. And yeah, there are other productions and this and that, but now it's over. What now? And I had put so much emotion and so much, I guess, self-worth into it that when it was over, it was sort of like, the next project is just not going to feel the same way to me. But of course, I got over it and got through it, and I just moved on to other projects, and I got over the expectation that every project feel the same way. You find different things that satisfy and make you happy in the different projects that you do.
When you started from the very beginning and you were like, I'm going to start writing, and you started writing, how did you deal with, and let me know if you didn't experience this, but I assume there was a lot of, why do you think you get to write this story, and why are you going to be successful, or no one's going to want to watch this? Why are you even like, there's a lot of those like stories that bounce around in your head.
Oh yeah.
How do you break through that? What is your coping mechanism for that?
Yeah. That, for anything, it's, who cares? Who's going to want to see this? I think, for that project, again, I was sort of in an advantage because it was like, okay, well, it's been 40 years. We premiered the play on the 40th anniversary of the fire. It's been 40 years. Nobody's done anything. So if I didn't really have a voice telling me, oh, someone else could do this better, or someone else should be doing this, because no one was, So it was like, it was more, someone ought to do something. I'm someone, so I'm going to do something. And, so, and in a way that breakthrough sort of has helped me on subsequent projects, because subsequent projects, I wouldn't say a fan base, but there are people who are interested in what I'm going to do next. And there are producers and people who want to hear from me and sort of want to keep in touch. And so I don't really have that feeling of, nobody cares anymore. And I think that first project being so important just kind of helped me get through that.
Yeah, you picked something that was bigger than yourself to start with, which is helpful.
Right.
And I do think, no matter how much you work at something, you're always going to wonder if you're any good at it, if the thing you make is any good, if it's any better than the average person, if it's remarkable, meaning whether it's of remark, worthy of it at all.
Yeah.
And everyone else is looking at you like, okay, that's nice, but it's just like another amateur thing that my buddy's doing that, I hear stuff all the time. My friend's doing this, my friend's doing that, and it's all kind of bad. Does this person have a real talent and skill and passion for it? And once you've shown the world that you can deliver, I think the world starts asking, okay, what else do you got?
What else you got? Yeah, I think it's a problem with our culture, really, that you don't, in a way, you don't count unless someone somewhere has declared that you count, because you're able to make a living at it, or because you're able to sell it for a certain price. That like I said, my dad is a musician. He never made it. He never, you won't hear him on any record that's come out of Nashville or LA or anywhere else. He does it. It never was his full-time career. Is he better than some of the people that I've heard on records? Hell yeah, he is. I just think we place this premium on whether people have been able to hit or make a living at it, or whatever else, or got signed to a label or this and that, and it's kind of a false premium. It's not really real. It's just something that we use to sort of filter out what we think is good from what we think is not good. And so, I have to ignore all of that. I especially now when the gatekeepers are, you can absolutely go around them. Even if I were, quote, good enough for Marvel or DC, they're not going to print what I'm writing anyway. No matter what. And I don't want to write Superman. That's not the story that I have to tell. So I think, we have to. For me, it's just try to ignore those voices and just focus on doing something that I'm satisfied with at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. The highest ideal in American culture, in at least the more urban, populous areas of the country, is the dollar and the accumulation of the dollar. It's not enough just to make six figures a year and drive a nice car and have a nice house and have a great pension or 401k. Right. You have to keep accumulating. It's an insatiable aim. And we look at that as, how good are you?
Yeah.
Or you mentioned labels signing people, where most major label artists are in fact broke, making less than $50,000 a year in take-home pay because they have to pay everything they made back to the label before they get paid.
Yeah.
And then they have to fund the next thing, or they go back in debt again for another album cycle. They have to pay back all the marketing and touring and then they have to pay all their manager and their bandmates and get to buy new music. And then at the end of the day, they take home their major label artist who, lives a very middle or lower middle class lifestyle, or they work a second job when they're not touring. Having done a lot of work in music the last year as on the side, understanding the economics, if you can create a sustainable way to make the thing that you want to make and sustain it in any way, you are successful.
Correct.
The success is the process. It is getting to make more of it.
Yeah.
And so this idea of career and vocation as being separate things has been really helpful for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, you mentioned sort of, I got friends and acquaintances who are like, okay, so is this any good, or is this just something you're, a friend of mine actually said that to me. He said, "Oh, I was scared to death to read your comic book because, so many people ask me to read their stuff and usually it's bad. And then I got to think of something good to say." And it was like, and he was very, very kind to me. He was like, "Well, fortunately, I don't have to do that today. I can tell you, and I know that feeling as a friend to people who are creators. And, but I feel like it's important to have those to have those connections, even if sometimes it's a little cringy.
Mm-hmm. Well, I also think that we put a lot of our own identity on our ability to critique art.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's not Watchmen, if it's not the next great graphic novel, then, and I like it, then do I have bad taste? If it's, if it's, if you wrote a singer-songwriter album and it's not well written and not well produced, but there's a lot of heart in it, but it's not like the next great Nashville record and I like it, or I'm complimentary of it in any way, then I have bad, we put a lot of our own identity on our critique of others, rather than just say, here's someone who is working, who's doing the work. Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, you have to admire anyone who's able to, to put the rest of their life on hold and go through the process and make something. And it's not easy to do, even if you're doing it full time, it's not easy to do. And there's so many mental barriers that we put up, and there's so many just finishing something. Anyone who finished anything is amazing, because it's hard to finish something.
Right. And even if you finish it, do you share it? Because it is having your name on it or your face is a level of vulnerability, and you're opening yourself up to be hurt by others in a way that most people will never let themselves be vulnerable. To say, this is my thing, this is me. What do you think? Is a very terrifying prospect.
Yeah.
And I was watching another podcast where they were talking about how you needed. It was a podcast with Rick Rubin, who's a world famous record producer, who was talking about the need to take both the insults and the compliments lightly, to just kind of let both roll off you.
Yeah.
And not like absorb yourself in not identify yourself by the good things people like. It feels great. Enjoy it. Yeah. But don't revel in it, because then you'll start reveling in the negative feedback too. And you'll let the negative stuff ruin your life.
Yeah. That really resonates with me. I feel like there's no way, at least for me, to adjust my filter in such a way that I'm letting in the good stuff and keeping the negative stuff out. I don't have that. So it's kind of all or nothing. And I think that's probably for the best, because, if all you're hearing is the good stuff, then, that might not go so well for you either in the long run.
Yeah. Rick Rubin talked about that further, where he talked about, and not to reference too much in other podcasts, but he talked about how, but if you just filter out all the bad and you don't let people critique you and push you, then you become like all these artists who lose relevance.
Yes.
Because now they just hear all the praise and good stuff. And when they're dishing out the weak sauce and the first version of any of our stuff for almost always is terrible. It's as bad as the person next to us. Like the first stuff you make is always, it's just not good. Or you luck out and then you don't trust it, so you make 6 other versions of it, and then you eventually go back to the first thing. But it's that like, it's just a very hard thing to expose yourself to. So it resonates with me when you talk about, people kind of like distancing themselves a little bit and not wanting to engage or support you until they know it's safe to do so. But once you've validated yourself, like you said, you have people who are at least open to the next thing in a way that you didn't experience when you did the first thing.
Right. That's exactly it.
Yeah. That's great. I really appreciate you sharing all that. That's really, I think that would be helpful for me to have heard 20 years ago when I first started in creative work. So you're doing the comic book now, and you do the first 2 chapters. You'd like to keep going, but of course these things take time to grow and build. Do you expect to return to musical theater? It sounds like you're still doing some of that.
Yeah. So I have a play that won an award in LA. It's called the Foursight Saga, that we really just finished up. I'm working with a composer on that one. So I wrote the book. Well, we call it the book and the lyrics. So the script, the spoken word, and then the song word, and he wrote the music, which was really nice for a change, to divide that labor. And he's really good at his job, and he's written some great tunes. But it's a story about two people who start out in love, and then at some point, later in life, in middle age, they start to regret a lot of choices they've made in their marriage, and one of them discovers a means to cast her consciousness back into her younger body, sort of quantum leap style, but only into her body. So she decides to go back and undo the fact that she said yes when he proposed. And this leads to a sort of comedy of errors. It's a two-person musical. So one person's playing all the versions of the guy, and one person's playing all the versions of the girl as they keep sort of going back in time and trying to undo what the other has done. And it turns into this sort of comedy of errors, and they learn a lot along the way about themselves and about what regret is and what timing means in our lives. And so it's a comedy. It's a lot of fun, and it's to be produced in August, COVID and other things allowing. Everything is always up in the air these days, but so I'm really excited about that. It's very different from Upstairs in almost every possible way, but it was really nice to just write something that is just fun and a comedy and a chance to flex my sort of sci-fi muscles, that kind of genre that I love. And so it was a great experience, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens next with that. As far as the future, now I'm in New Orleans. The 50th anniversary of the fire is coming up. My intention is to produce the play again here for the 50th anniversary with an all New Orleans cast and crew. But that's a couple of years down the road. And here I'm writing my comic book, and I'm sort of listening and waiting to see what happens next for me creatively. I'm sort of trying to just keep my eyes and ears open and my other senses and see what develops.
Well, certainly live theater was booming before COVID. And if there was ever an appetite to get out and do things again after this, seems like there's going to be a great season for live things again in the future.
Yeah, I think so. I certainly New York is starting to open back up, and that's sort of a bellwether for the rest of us. And so I think theater will be part of what I do here, but I don't think it'll be all. I don't know what it's going to be, but I just have I want to just keep an open mind about what's next.
I love that. Yeah. My last question, and thank you for sharing all your journey and your headspace. And I've known you for several years, but to connect with you in a creative way is really fun.
I agree.
I feel like I'm seeing, deeper into you as a person in a way that I really like. It's really cool.
Agreed.
If somebody, when you encounter someone who's like, and let's say they have a talent or a skill, but they don't know how to get past it's kind of like, if I can't make it, then I can't go do it. They're just kind of stuck. what would you tell them in terms of pursuing that passion or that creative outlet that they have?
I feel like it's a matter of psychological, mental self-care to do the thing that you love to do, even if no one ever pays you a cent, even if you have to pay to do it. I find this a lot with stand-up comedy. That's a place where the price of entry is so small. All you have to do, I mean literally the price, the cost. All you have to do is write some jokes and go find an open mic. That's all you have to do. And I know people who are so funny and who, can write jokes, but they just never take that step of going and standing at an open mic because, while the cost of entry is just about the lowest of any creative field, it's probably the scariest, to stand there and just be like, okay, if they laugh, I win. If they don't laugh, I lose. And so, but I encourage those people because I've known a few that, if it's just speaking to your heart, if you're a person who you're in the shower and you're writing jokes, like literally writing jokes, or if you're, a person who's humming new tunes all the time, or who just can't keep their fingers off the piano, I feel like you owe it to yourself to do it, no matter what. And I think that to do it in front of people, to do it in a way where people are able to approve or disapprove, is maybe not necessary, but it's satisfying in a way that nothing else is. I promise. Like for me personally, even Upstairs had jokes in it. I mean, it couldn't be just grim all the time. Sitting in an audience and having the place erupt with laughter over a joke that I wrote, if I could bottle that and spray it on me every day, I would. It was just that powerful for me. And I feel like people are selling themselves short if they don't take a chance to experience something like that, to experience touching someone with a talent that you were blessed to have. Is a tremendous, and I think that's how I encourage people. That's what I say to them if they ask.
Yeah, back to I love that. Back to what your original inspiration was: is someone needs to tell this story. I'm someone, and this is how I can tell it. I think most human beings have that within them.
I think so.
And I wish more took that step. And that's saying, look at the internet, like it's full of people making stuff, right? And you think, there's no end. We have too much content. But I think that we have a lot of people repeating other people's formulas and other people's styles and other people's art. They're just mimicking it and just hoping it catches on, and they just make a lot of it.
Yeah.
And that's a fine way to learn. I think what I'm interested in is what is that person's uniqueness and voice and originality. Yeah.
And, a lot of times, it's also done anonymously with these memes sort of, no one knows where they came from, and I think it gives people kind of a thrill to sort of put something out there and not have to put their names on it, which I totally understand. I get it. But again, if people are they're missing out on, I think, one of the great experiences in life of just touching someone with what they can do. and either with laughter or with tears or with with emotion. It's a special thing, and not everybody gets to do it. So if you can, do it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah. What if the person, the artist, the musician, the writer who you love decided they were too scared, or they just chose not to do that? How would your life be different?
Oh yeah. I think of that all the time with, and this is another podcast, but I won't say the name of it, but Tyler Mahan Co. is the name of the creator. And it's a podcast about country music, but it's so well done. There's no music podcast like it, where he is going into the history and telling the stories in a way that is just so specific and so expertly done. And if he didn't do it, no one would be doing it. Like if he decided, oh, well, I'm embarrassed, I don't want to do it, or whatever, it wouldn't get done. There would be no one doing that at all. So at his level, so it's if there had never been an Aretha Franklin, I just don't know what I would do with myself.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. I really appreciate the work you're putting out. I see it, and I'm excited to see it grow and for you to get back into it. I think you've started a new season in your life where you're going to be able to do more of this. And so
absolutely,
I'm glad you're doing that.
Well, thanks a lot, Patrick.
Thanks for being on the podcast.
A pleasure talking to you.
All right.